In this video, we're going to talk about how to use hand path in the backswing to affect a more in to out path in the downswing to hit that draw you've been wanting to hit right after this. Welcome guys back to the channel. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for being here. If you're not a subscriber, please go ahead and click that button. If you're a subscriber, click the other button, the bell, right? So you can know what's going on. With that being said, let's get to the gist of the video. Before we talk about what we might need to do, let's talk about what less skilled golfers, what you typically see in a backswing that would make them swing more either over the top or just really steep down into the ball. So we have to consider the golf swing is not just two dimensions, it's three. From a face view, you would see some sort of width to the arc. From down the line or face view, you would see some elevation of the club in the vertical component, but also we would see movement of the club in the depth dimension. Most golfers have very little problem creating the arc from the front view, but the poor striker of the golf ball tends to struggle with the balance between the vertical and the depth dimension. So in other words, the poor golfer tends to get much more movement in the vertical dimension and not much into the depth. The problem is your golf club is not designed to be swung vertical. It's not designed to be swung horizontal. It's somewhere in between approximately. So in that regard, we have to balance out these two dimensions, right? The vertical and the depth dimension. Otherwise, we're going to struggle with either dimension. And so again, the less skilled golfer typically, like for example at P2, the hands work away from the body. At P3, the hands are basically underneath the chin, or even some folks outside the chin. At the top of the swing, the grip is typically either right behind the neck or in some people almost in line with the head. So therefore the sweet spot is not very far away from the ball. So in that regard, we're going to have a tough time if we begin to rotate. We're going to come out and across, or if we find some way not to, in other words, come across by delaying rotation, we're going to come down on a very steep angle. Then we're going to go into a lot of ulnar. It's going to hit the ball with an oblique type of motion. Toe's going to dig into the ground. Shaft's going to stand up. Face is going to be projected to the right. So you don't want to do any of that, and I don't either. So let's talk about the best way to get this job done. Okay, so what we're trying to do is balance out this inward or depth dimension with the vertical dimension to move the path of the hands more inward in the backswing, so that therefore they can be moving more out towards the ball on an in to out swing path on the downswing. Simple, right? So to do this, we need some checkpoints to go through. Please use a mirror. If you don't have that, get the Mirror Vision app. Great, awesome, easy to use. So if I get into my setup here, when I get to P2, or shaft about first parallel to the ground, hopefully from the camera angle you can see that my hands have moved into approximately the location of the front of my right hip. Now, you may be wondering, how do I do that? Easy to see from a horizontal plane. If I rotate my chest, my hands move in. Now, we have to balance that. So in other words, we don't just want to suck the hands straight behind us. Otherwise, the hands are going to stay really low. We're going to have a golf swing that looks something like this, and we'll hit it nowhere. So to balance out the inward component of the rotation, we have to be bending the chest to the left, so that when we get to the top of the swing, we look like we're in our spine angle, but we've rotated and side bent. That's what balances out the inward component. And by the way, when you start moving into left shoulder down, that helps give the elevation to the club, okay? So we're not just standing here just lifting the arms up. So P1 to P2, I'm rotating and mildly side bending. P2 to P3, left arm parallel to the floor. My hands start to intersect with the lower section of my right elbow, or for some people, mid bicep. So that's a good look right there. So now my hands are here, and they started, as you can see here. So my hands have moved mildly in, again because I'm rotating and side bending to balance this out. Now that's my P4. Not a huge backswing. I have poor genetics for flexibility and just an inopportunity to really stretch a lot. So yes, you will see players who can make a bigger swing, but again, if you'll notice, now the position of my hands are basically in line with my right shoulder, and my left arm's covering the angle of my shoulders. Okay, so my hands have moved in this much from here to here. Not a great deal. And remember, the whole time I'm balancing that as I rotate, in order to keep my head steady, left side bend as I rotate, there's the top. So there's another good trick you can use if you don't have a mirror or mirror vision or something like that. Hopefully you can see this grid on the floor. If not, we'll put a close-up. But when I get to P3, I'm going to notice that my left arm is roughly matching this stick on the floor, which is approximately 15 degrees. It's going to vary depending on club, but for a baseline, you can use that little trick, because if I got to P3 and my left arm is out where my hands are underneath my chin, again, either I have to make some manipulation going up, or if I swung down, I'd come down very steep. So use that little tool, and that way you don't have to look around. You can just look down at the floor. And again, it's a rough guide, but it'll give you a good feel. So now if I balance out the movements, left side bend, rotation, get my hand path in, appropriate depth in the backswing, I should be able to swing from the inside and hit some sort of nice push draw. And so that's not bad for the first shot of the day, believe it or not. With a little bit of practice, we should be able to develop this foundation in the backswing where the hands are working in. We're balancing out the depth dimension with the height dimension to give ourselves the most advantageous place of the sweet spot to create all this space to swing down from the inside versus having the club much closer to the target line and having to either reroute it, which tends to open the face, or going into early extension to fix the sweet spot, coming down too much across, then uncocking the wrist, digging the toe into the floor. All those things that give us nightmares, right? Let's see if we can start this one a little more to the right and get it to draw back in. Okay, so a couple of draw shots there for you to look at. None of them absolutely perfect, but you get the gist. We can influence the path, make the ball draw by getting the hands to work in and up on the appropriate balance so that our path can be in to out much more easier than keeping the sweet spot real close to the target line and having to make some fancy loop or early extend or all those things that make us very inconsistent. So let that be a lesson to all of us. Consistency comes from balance. Okay. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like. We'll see you soon. Thanks for joining me.